A Texas janitor accused of urinating in people's drinks, and one woman says she now has an STD. Criminal defense attorney Nicole DeBorde comes on to discuss this bizarre and disgusting criminal case. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. What a story out of Houston, Texas right now. A janitor has been accused of urinating into a woman's water bottle, and she says she now has an STD that has been confirmed by a test. I'm not kidding you. You heard it right. Lucio Diaz has been charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and indecent assault concerning this 54-year-old woman. And without getting too graphic for you, Diaz was allegedly caught in the act on a hidden camera set up by the woman. But if you didn't think that that was bad enough, now 13 more victims have come forward saying that Diaz urinated into their drinks as well. I'm joined right now by Houston criminal defense attorney Nicole DeBorde. Nicole, I bet you didn't think that your first appearance on Sidebar would be this kind of story.
I did not. Talk about gross. It is definitely not the average subject matter for criminal court, and I think he faces some pretty big problems ahead.
Well, let's get into it. So let me give everybody a little bit of a backstory here. So according to authorities, this woman stated that the water that she got from the water dispenser at work had a funny taste and a smell to it. And because of this sour taste and smell, she dumped the water and threw her water bottle out. And the complainant, the woman who was accusing this, said that because of what she experienced with the water dispenser, then she started bringing her own water bottles to drink. But when she brought her own water bottle, she noted several days later that the personal bottle, which she left in her office, smelled nasty, but she couldn't figure out what the smell was. So she threw it away. She got another one. And then a coworker at a doctor's office noticed that the water inside was yellow. And this woman checked it out. It smelled of urine, and even a doctor, and I think there's a urine test they did, confirmed it to be urine. I mean, what are your initial thoughts here on these accusations, the evidence that they have against him, and the current charges he's facing?
Well, it's an abnormal charge, which is usually an additional challenge for the prosecution, but this one is just so absolutely gross with a capital G. I think any jurors that ultimately hear this story are going to be as put off as everybody else is who hears what you just described. And I think that he has a tough legal battle ahead. I think that these are serious felony charges that could stick and could throw him in prison.
And the idea of her getting the STD, she was quoted as saying, "He gave me an STD I will have for the rest of my life." She previously told this to a media outlet. "Nothing is going to change it. Nothing will make it better for me. In fact, I feel like for the rest of my life, I will have to be careful." Understandably so. The fact that she allegedly obtained an STD or was infected with an STD because of what this guy did, how does that affect the current charges? Because I'm asking you this because, again, there are 13 more people have come forward. I'm thinking the charges could be upgraded to something even worse. And what could those be?
Absolutely. And the reality is that in Texas, the statute for aggravated assault considers whether or not a person suffered serious bodily injury as the result of the attack or the assault or the crime. And in this instance, certainly the prosecution can argue that this is serious bodily injury. It is a disease from which she will never be cured. And that is likely to be the prosecution's angle, if you will, if there needs to be an angle. And I think additionally, it is against the law in the state of Texas to knowingly transmit a sexually transmitted disease, and he could potentially face prosecution for that as well.
I'm sure he would come up with a defense if he actually decided to fight this, saying, "I didn't realize by doing that I would transfer an STD," right? I mean, I'm trying to imagine a defense here, Nicole. It's really tough, but if that either A, he'll say, identity, it wasn't me, or, right? I mean, do you actually have him on camera urinating or doing something else? Or he says, "Look, I had no intention of passing an STD." Maybe he would come up with some other explanation.
Exactly. And, I really just can't resist. Will that defense hold water? I do not think so. I don't think that it will. I think that ultimately, anytime you're evaluating a case for trial, whether it's with the prosecution from their side or the defense, you have to envision yourself standing in front of a jury and telling that story. And I think because the conduct in this instance is just so outrageous, it's an uphill battle for the defense.
What a terrible job for a jury to oversee this case. Before we even, we focus on the criminal case for a second. Let's also go to the civil case, because this woman and other people have now filed a lawsuit against the companies that ran this medical office building, saying that they failed in their duties to hire this guy as a janitor to oversee this. They didn't properly address the water allegations. Now, Terry Quinn, who's the CEO of building owner Alterra Fund Advisors, released a statement. Our management company immediately cooperated with the police department in this matter as soon as we were made aware of this potential issue by our tenant. They were advised by the police to not alert or approach the alleged perpetrator so that he could be arrested. He was arrested when he returned to the building. What do you think?
It is a strong case because of the conduct. And I think also there's the potential for significant damages if the plaintiffs or the accusers win the lawsuit. There's a big difference between, of course, a prosecution and the burden of proof and a civil suit, which is really just more likely than not. Do you believe it 51% to be true? And did it cause this damage? They're going to have to be making some decisions about whether or not this is a lawsuit worth fighting, or whether or not it makes more sense to potentially settle something like this. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the easiest thing to prove, because it is indeed somewhat unpredictable conduct. I think that most security officers or people who are trying to keep a building safe probably don't envision this type of conduct. And that's not generally what they're trying to protect the people who work in the building from. That said, there may be still some responsibility on the part of the building to keep the property secure and to do background checks on the people who are entering.
And they might settle this to try to, because then they might not want to take this to trial. Just going back to Diaz for a second, I want to give everybody a little backstory on this. So apparently, he is currently in ICE custody. He's at least been living in Houston. It's been reported 22 years. He is a family man. He's been granted a $75,000 bond, but he's prohibited from receiving a personal bond. Can you walk us through what that means in terms of if he's actually going to be out pending this case, and also the idea of ICE getting involved?
So if he's got an immigration hold, even if he were to be granted bond, which by law in Texas, a judge has to set a bond for a case of this nature. But if he's got an immigration hold, which it sounds like he does, if he is in ICE custody, then even if he paid the bond, he would not be out. What would happen is he would be transferred to a facility that houses people who are waiting for an immigration hearing and a determination about whether or not it's lawful for them to remain in the United States. So I think that's a complicated answer to your question. In other words, he could pay bond, which should ordinarily release him. But if he has an immigration hold, he won't be going anywhere.
But is there any chance he would be, kicked out of the country as a result of this?
There could be. Typically, what happens is that even with an immigration hold, as long as criminal charges are pending, the criminal charges are allowed to run their course, and that means, of course, that he would be coming back to, felony district court in order to address these charges. That said, sometimes if someone gets transferred to immigration custody, even though the case isn't done, there could be an error, and he could be removed if he's removable prior to the conclusion of his criminal case.
What a disturbing story. I mean, it really does make you second guess what's happening behind the scenes. People work in office buildings, they see the cleaning crews, they see the janitors. Sometimes people don't give them a second look. I'm wondering if this story is going to open people's eyes. Really disturbing to see. Nicole DeBorde, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
And thanks everybody for joining us here on Sidebar. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.